This week, something happened in our own backyard, Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach. And man, what a devastating thing to happen. And I'm going to pray for the families. I'm going to pray for the individuals. But there'll be some names displayed up here. And I just want you all to take note of the names. Take note of the people who lost their lives. Not going to war, right? Not doing anything just terrible. But they went to work. As a lot of us will do tomorrow. And they went to that place and they left this place. So with that, I'm just gonna take a moment of silence and then I'll pray for the individuals and their families. Have a moment of silence with me, please. God, I thank you. Lord, you've done so much for me personally. You've done so much for me and for the people around me, and you continue to bless and you continue to just be this God that I really don't deserve. I didn't deserve salvation. I didn't deserve freedom. I didn't deserve for you to bless me. I didn't deserve for you to keep pouring out and giving me chance after chance. But you do it. You do it because you love me. God, I ask that you would just be with the family of those who lost their lives this week. God, I'm sure that no one expected their loved one to go to work and to never come back home. And that's a hard thing to swallow when it's all of a sudden, God, but I ask that you would comfort those families. God, I pray for the communities that they live in, and God, allow their neighbors, allow us to reach out, to be there, to be a gap, God, to be a comfort, to be a help, to be your hands here on earth. God, there's so many things, not just Virginia Beach, but just all over the world where things that are told to us and a lot of things we don't even know. But there's devastation each and every day. And God, I ask that you would use us every single day. God, to be a reflection to you. God, at a time when it's so critical, God, you are on your way. And God, we ask that you would use us. God, allow us to be your tools, allow us to be your hands, God, in this place. Not just in these four walls, God, but allow us to touch the people we see each and every day. God, open our minds, open our hearts, God, so that we may receive everything that you have for us. God, we love you always. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. It's not often that we find ourselves dealing with tragedy that is local, that is so close. Many of us watch the news and we see things like this happen over and over around the country and around the world. I'm never thinking it will be so close to us. I was born in Virginia Beach, grew up in Virginia Beach, spent a lot of time over there throughout the week. And my heart hurts for those who have been affected. My heart hurts for the loss of life. My heart hurts for those who got out safely but witnessed things they'll never shake. And when we find ourselves in tragedy like this, we often wonder what we are to do, how we are to respond, how we should react. In my personal life, I've been very blessed. I've never really faced too much tragedy. My grandparents are both still alive, and we've only lost one family member through the years, and that was 10 years ago. And something that I saw in that tragedy that I've tried to live out since that moment, my cousin was killed in a motorcycle accident. His name was Troy. He was a year older than me. We spent a lot of time together, played on the same teams, spent the night, more of a brother. He and about 5 other boy cousins that I had, we were like brothers. And when he passed, there was a large funeral. Thousands of people gathered because he was a teacher in the local school. He died tragically. It was all over the news. And he was a Christian. And My extended family was there, and we were mourning, but it was a Christian burial service. There was hope because we knew we'd see Troy again, and there were songs of encouragement that were sung. And there was an individual in the crowd that day that was very disturbed by what he saw. Now, I don't remember his name, but he was the first person that came upon my cousin after the accident. He witnessed the whole thing, and he saw in awful detail what took place to my cousin's body. And he was shaken. And he came up to one of my uncles, and he said, I don't understand you people. And my uncle put his arm around him and said, hey, that makes sense because we're believers, and here's what you have to understand. We're going to see Troy again. We have a hope in heaven, and we have a peace. Now, we mourn and we miss him. But we have a peace that is different. It passes all understanding. And so we mourn this morning, but we can still find joy tomorrow, knowing that our Troy is not gone forever. And that man walked out of there just completely shaken by the joy and the peace that Troy's parents displayed that morning. Christians, can I tell us, when the world doesn't know what to do in moments like this, we don't need to be calloused in our joy or discouraging in our peace, but we should be a light, a city that is set on a hill, and how we can live filled with peace in a world that does not know peace. I'm thankful the division hasn't started yet locally. It has started nationally. People on both sides will use this, but locally, our community is bonded together and we have honored the victims. We have done all that we can to focus on their families. We as Christians should, like nobody else, be able to walk through dark days, putting joy and peace in the midst of hard circumstances. So that is my encouragement to us as a church. We should do all that we can. I hope you visited. I went to the website that Virginia Beach put up. There are ways you can volunteer your time. There are donations being received for the families. They've already raised quite a few $1,000s, but if you can give this morning, I'd encourage you to give there. If you have time to volunteer this week, I'd encourage you to go to that website and volunteer there. But while we do these good things, let us put joy and peace on display that passes all understanding. A few weeks ago, we started a series called Life Restored, and it's interesting where we find ourselves this morning. We've been talking about why we believe and how we grow and why we connect, and this morning we're going to talk about something that we believe as a church, something we live out as Christians, something that is a core value for us on our teams, in our staff, everywhere, and that is this: we prepare because we believe the best is yet to come. I believe that about you. I believe that about your family. I believe that about this church. I believe that about every area of life. And when we hear that, some of us get a little discouraged because we think best and we think more. We think best and we think money. We hear best and we think possessions. We hear best and we think success. And so this morning, I want us to really wrap our heads around the idea of preparing my heart for all that God's going to do in me, even when the things God does in me sometimes are painful, sometimes are hard. But I believe that the best is yet to come in my personal life, in my marriage, in my family, in my everything, my finances, my physical body. You say, wait a minute, we're getting older. That's true. But even in old age, God says he can use us even when our feet are weary, even when our legs don't have the strength that they used to. You see, we live in a world that is completely broken and the wheels are coming off. The older we get, the harder it is on our bodies, amen? Everything. When we think of the best is yet to come, don't you think younger, faster, stronger? Well, I got news for you. I'm getting older, slower, and weaker, right? The only part of me that's getting bigger ain't my chest, it's my stomach. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want parts of my body to grow. They're not the ones that are growing. So when I tell you the best is yet to come, I don't want you to walk out of here with the wrong idea. I want us to define clearly what the best is and what that looks like. And I believe this for you, I believe this for your family, and I believe this for our church. And here's why. Because this is something that I struggled with last year. And I struggled with in 2017. But this year, God has given me a peace about this. I used to lay up at night wondering and worrying about our church. I haven't done that this year. I have a freedom and a peace that I have never known as pastor of this church. Jesus said he will build his church, and guess what? That takes the pressure off of me. Can I tell you another thing that's true and we don't think about sometimes? We have a history of God doing what he said. I don't know about your personal life, but can I tell you about our church? For the last 3 years, we have a history of God growing our church in every number, every category, everything. Whether we're talking offerings, whether we're talking having our own building, whether we're talking about our kids' ministry growing, our volunteers, you name it. More than 150 people are part of our serve teams at Restore Church. About 300 people call our church home, and every weekend more than 200 people gather to worship together. That was not the case 2 years ago. Our church has a history of growth. And so I'm not going to worry about growth. Because when I say the best is yet to come, we're not just talking about budgets, bodies in the room, ministries. Sometimes the best comes through hardship, through lean years. So this morning I want to look at the best, the future, through the lens of the scriptures, not the American dream, if that makes sense. Because the American dream says that when you want it, you should get it, you should have it as soon as possible. And sometimes God does something in us that takes a decade instead of a year. God builds something in us that takes longer than it builds to build a business, to build an income, to start a family. So this morning, I want to start with this idea in mind. We need to understand a few things about preparing, why we prepare, and what God is doing. First thing we need to understand is this. We need to understand what the best is. What is the best? When Jesus talked about our best life, what was he talking about? See, I grew up in America. I grew up in this part of Hampton Roads. I grew up in Virginia Beach. And one of my first jobs was passing out flyers for a home builder in very expensive parts of Virginia Beach. So when I was 15, I was walking around some of the nicest neighborhoods in Hampton Roads that were on the water. And y'all, I got bit by the dream. You know what I'm saying? I want a pool. I want a pool that overlooks my boat. I want a pool that overlooks my boat that overlooks the bay. I want a pool that overlooks my boat that overlooks the bay, and then I can see the resort city in the background. I want that. I was 15 years old. I remember pulling up to this door, and it was the first time I'd ever been to a house you could see through the whole house. Just glass to glass to glass to bay to bay. I was like, I don't live in that house. But even if I did, that's not the best that is yet to come that I'm talking about. You may have that. That's fine. But if you have that, you probably realize that's not all there is to life. Let me put it this way. Let's look at what the scriptures say about the future, about living this, about what the best is. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 18. Paul said, give thanks in all circumstances. I would give thanks if I had a window overlooking the bay, overlooking my boat, overlooking my pool. Amen? But God said, amen, yeah. Amen. God said to give thanks even when there is no boat, there is no bay, there is no window. See, Paul was writing this having been in prison. Paul put it this way, I can do all things through Christ. The context there, the verse before, he said, I have known much. He was a well-educated man. He had books. He had wealth. Not many people had books in that time of history, and he had a lot of money at his disposal. He traveled. Not many people had. He got to experience real wealth, but he said, I've also experienced real poverty. I've been in prison. He said, but I can do all things. Like, I have learned to be content in both. So when God calls us to give thanks in all circumstances, Paul isn't saying, all the good things. He's saying all circumstances. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. You want to know what God's will is? You want to know what God's general will? Number one, it starts right here. Have the right attitude all the time. Say, Mark, you don't know what I promise you. We've all been through things, but God said, I want you to give thanks. And when we say give thanks, here's what we think. All right, you're right. God, thank you. Thank you for everything I have. Amen. That's a weak prayer life, and that's why you have a weak spiritual life. The psalmist put it this way. He said, I'm going to declare all the good God has done for me. I think it's really good for you to pull out a pen and paper sometime. I did it this week, and I just started writing down, God, I'm thankful for these things. Before I knew it, there was 20 things on my page, and they weren't 20 dumb things. They weren't like, thanks for my bike. They were like, God, thank you for these good things. Thank you for the home I grew up in. God, thank you for my wife. God, I'm healthy today. There are people in our church who would love to be healthy today. And I started writing, maybe you're more digital. Man, pull out a note on your phone and start a note at the top that says, things I'm thankful for. It would be good for your soul to write them down. I don't encourage you to not pay attention, but if you're going to do something else while I'm talking, maybe do that this morning, all right? Pull out your phone and start writing out things you're thankful for. And then don't just keep them to yourself. Tweet. Share. Go public. Say, I'm thankful for these things. And if you hear me complaining this week, check my attitude. Because here's the problem with a lot of Christians. We got so much to be thankful for, but all we do is walk around and complain. And we wonder why nobody wants to be a Christian. Why nobody wants to go to church with us. Y'all, there are a lot of people who have a whole lot more than me. There are a lot of people that have a whole lot less than me. But I'm going to tell you what, I don't run into many people who are content these days with what they have. I may never have a window overlooking a bay, overlooking my boat, overlooking my pool, amen? But I can be content with my window, with my view. I can be content with what God has entrusted me with. This morning, I want you to start with the attitude of thankfulness, understanding that we're thankful even when things don't go our way. But if we're really going to understand what the best is, we got to look at it the way Jesus said it. And it's tough. I'm going to read you a hard verse. Luke chapter 9, verse 23. Jesus said, if anyone would come after me, you're going to follow me, you're going to be a Christian, you're going to be a Christ follower, a believer, let him deny himself. Ooh, that is countercultural. Deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. Now, I'm all for these guys who pick up their cross once a year and walk 10 miles. That sounds fun. That sounds easy. Daily? By the way, I think those guys missed the point. Daily picking up your cross and carrying it. That's the idea of daily dying to my desires. You know, God gave us desires, and not all desires are wrong. My desire to eat is good. I need to eat to survive, right? All of us have desires, and not all of them are wrong. It's wrong when we allow those desires to drive our life. Sex is a good thing inside of marriage, but when we allow sex to determine who we are, what we do, and what we chase, and what we think about, and all we are is wrapped up in, man, I got to have more sex. Well, then we've allowed sex, our desires, to rob us of what life is all about. Nothing wrong with money. I got gas this morning at Kroger on my way here. You know what I'm saying? Use my fuel points, get 10 cents off. And you know what they charged me? They charged me money to get gas, because there ain't nothing wrong with money. It's when we allow money, the love of money, to rule our lives. And we love money more than people. And so we'll steal from people, we'll abuse people, we'll misuse people to get more money. We'll spend less time with people we should be spending time with because we got to get more money. See, desires have a way, if we're not careful, of robbing us of what life is all about. 1 Peter put it this way, and we're going to read from Peter a lot this morning, and we're going to focus on him toward the end. 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 11 through 15, he says, behold, I urge you as sojourners. There's a word that matters. He says, we're passing through. Y'all, I'm going to spend forever in heaven. I just got 100 years here. I'm going to live to be 100. I don't know if y'all know that. You know, with modern medicine and the way I take care. We're all going to live to be 100, right? Because, anyways. We'll say we have 100 years. 100 years here compared to eternity is not much. He says, you're a sojourner. This is a trip. This is travel. You're going through. Then he uses another word, and exiles. A little different. Sojourners are like, I love travel. I'm a sojourner. Exiles are like, whoa. This isn't my home. I can't get to my home right now. To abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. There are two parts of your existence that are constantly at war, and they will be at war until the day you die. You have a soul and you have flesh. Flesh is what the desires rise up, and not all desires are wrong. We talked about eating. We talked about money. We talked about sex. We are given to natural desires. Our bodies want to be pleased. But then there's another side of our flesh that doesn't just want to be pleased. It cares more about us than anybody else. It can tend to be selfish. It can lead to the way we treat people, it can lead to dark habits. And so Jesus says, don't let your flesh rob you of your soul. We illustrate it really poorly. We use the devil and the angel on the shoulder. Kind of the same thing, but way different. It's us. It's my soul. That's the part of me that knows what's right. It's your spirit that knows what you should do, but sometimes you don't. Or convicts you when you do what's wrong because you knew it was the wrong thing to do. Notice this. He says, keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable. Live a good life. Live honorably. So that when they speak evil against you, they may see your good deeds and glorify God. This is the point. I am here to do it, live a good life, so that they cannot dishonor God through the way that I live. He says that so that the day of visitation, they will glorify God. Be subject for the Lord's sake to every human institution. There's a reason that I obey laws that I don't like. All right? I really think the speed limit on my street should be 45 for some reason because I want to get home faster. I disagree with it, but I obey it mostly. All right? So we do, we should. Anyways, but we obey the rules. Why? Because we want to? No, there are a lot of laws y'all don't like obeying. Certainly around April 15th, we all suddenly find ourselves on the wrong side of the law. I don't agree with taxes at all. But we obey them. He says, whether it be to the emperor supreme, and listen, they lived in a time where their emperor was killing them. Was persecuting them. Or to governors sent by him who punish those who do evil and praise those who do good. For this is the will of God. This is God's will. That by doing good, you should put to silence the ignorance of foolish people. The best that is yet to come may very well be you putting silence to foolishness through the way that you live. Even when you're mocked and ridiculed, that's the understood here. Paul's saying, the best isn't like we're going to stop being persecuted. That may or may not happen. We're going to learn to live in light of who we represent. So first of all, if we're going to understand that the best is yet to come, we need to understand, church, sometimes that means it'll get harder. You know, the church is growing in parts of the world where it's illegal to have church. The church in the Middle East is doing very, very well, surprisingly, even though many of them are persecuted and executed. This week I saw on the news there was a large gathering of Christians in China that were taken under arrest. But the church continues to thrive. I don't know what will happen, but in the future, if persecution does come to the American church, I believe it would probably be good for the American Christians, for us to understand what real faith looks like. I don't pray for persecution. I pray for God to use whatever he needs to get our attention, to make us the people he's called us to be, so that we'll do what he's called us to do. So understand this. Let's talk personal. Let's not talk church. Let's talk about you and me. When I say that the best is yet to come for you, that may mean that things get worse before they get better. See, all of us have this very HGTV idea of our lives getting better. It's bad. Then a designer comes in and says, we'll fix this, this, and this. And within 30 minutes, it's beautiful. Right? That's what all of us want. We want to come to church. We want a preacher to say, it's bad. I know. But 30 minutes later, it's beautiful. God has changed me. And it certainly, in a moment, we turn our heart to Jesus, but we still walk out with some temptation, with some struggle, with some habits, with some problems, right? With some relational issues, with some kids' issues, with some work issues, with some heart issues. My wife and I, we don't love it, but this is what we do. We invest in real estate, and we flip a lot of houses from time to time. And when we flip them, we don't flip them to sell them. We flip them to hold on to them and to rent them out. And that's a very different game. We're not just flipping them to look pretty. We're flipping them to hold up against dogs, to hold up against kids, to hold up against people who don't know how to close doors. You know what I'm saying? Like, we are constantly worried about how things last. And you know what always happens? We buy these houses, and before things get better, they get way worse. Because before I can put in new flooring, I've got to rip out the old carpet. And the old carpet was bad, don't get me wrong. But you know what's worse than bad carpet? No carpet, right? A bathroom with broken tiles and a leaky toilet is bad. You know what's worse? A bathroom where you can see the crawl space through it, all right? We've ripped everything out. But it's got to get worse before it gets better. Some of us are guilty of this. We want our marriage to get better, but the second we start talking with somebody and things get hard, we're like, this isn't working. We want our souls to be changed, but the second God starts doing work in our heart that feels uncomfortable, we say, whoa, that's not fun. You and I need to understand what best is. Best comes often as a result of the worst days, the hardest days, the long nights. I believe this. I believe Jesus wants to use your life. I believe he wants to use you not only where you are, but in places you wouldn't even dream of him taking you, in ways you wouldn't imagine that he could use you. I mean, some of you are terrified of some things that God could use you to do. When I was in high school, I hated public speaking. Speech class was the worst. I didn't like it at all. It was all I could do to talk for more than 5 minutes about something. And some of you wish I was still like that, so I wouldn't preach as long. But listen, I didn't want to be in front of people, but today I love it. I love what God's called me to do. I love what he allows me to do. Make no mistake about it. God has a best for you, but it's going to be hard. It may pull you out of your comfort zone. Second thing we got to understand is not just what is the best. We need to understand God's timing. When I tell you that we prepare as a church, that we prepare as individuals because the best is yet to come, all of you are like, yep, and it's this week. This week, the best is going to come. This week, it's going to happen. That is the lottery mindset in us, all right? We like that 0 to a million real quick type story. We like rags to riches, but we forget that it took a decade. We forget that it took a lifetime. I want you to read with me what God says about his timing and how that works. Ecclesiastes chapter 3 in verse 11. Read the wisdom put here. He has made everything beautiful in its time. In its time. See, some of you, and me included, man, we want everything right now, but if we had gotten it when we wanted it, we wouldn't have valued it. we wouldn't have realized what a blessing it was or how much work it required. Everything is beautiful in its time. He has put eternity in a man's heart. Yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. We are constantly wondering, and where does time begin? Where does it end? When does this thing all wrap up? What does it look like? Read it another way in 2 Peter chapter 3 and verse 8. Again, Peter, we're going to mention him again because we're going to read about him toward the end. But do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day. This is a verse that confuses and confounds a lot of people. We forget that God created everything. If God created it, then he's outside of it. All right? He's not bound by it. So when I say God is eternal, you might get the idea that I did when I was a kid. It's like God goes all the way this way, and God goes all the way that. That's part of it. That's part of it. But it's also this. It's that God created time, therefore he's not limited by it. And that's what this verse is really illustrating here. God created time. So he's looking at it all. Like he can see today just like he could see 1,000 years ago. We live in time and space. We're bound by them. God is not. You understand? So when God looks at your life, he's not bound by what you're feeling right now. He's not bound by this deadline you've placed. He's saying, I see all of it. I see the end of your story. I see the front of your story, and it's as if they were all right now. I see it. Read it this way in Psalm chapter 27, verse 14. Wait for the Lord. Be strong. It will take strength. And let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord. Twice we're encouraged to wait for the Lord. I think a lot of people get the wrong idea about when I say we prepare, what that means. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But then when I say the best is yet to come, they get this idea that there's going to be this day when everything just starts making sense and everything starts happening. And there are certainly stories in the scriptures like that. But most of the people that got used, there wasn't this one day. There was one day where they placed their faith in him. There was one day where they grew, where they turned from their ways and acknowledged his. But then it was this lifetime of growing into who God was making them to be. Can I tell you, a lot of people in our church, we get this idea that there was this day where our church just exploded with growth. We've never really had a year like that at our church. We have grown slowly as a church. We have a history of God blessing us as a church. And by the way, so do you. You want to be encouraged? Sit down and write down all the things God has blessed you with and remind yourself. Remind the enemy when he gets in your head, I have a history of God using me. I have a history of God blessing me. I have a history of God forgiving me. I have a history of God coming through when I needed him to. So why would I doubt that today when he came through last Thursday? Why would I doubt that this year when 10 years ago it was true? God is on my side, has a plan, and it may be hard today, but I'm going to wait on the Lord. I'm going to let my heart take courage. In other words, I'm going to declare some bold things. I'm going to be courageous in my faith. I'm going to say, God, you know what? I don't understand it, but I believe you can use this in my life. I believe that this is not the end. The number one lie that I face as a pastor and I face as an individual is this. God has brought you this far only to let you fail and let you fail publicly and embarrass everyone. That is the lie that is constantly in my head. It has been there since I was 11 years old. It is something I wrestle with and I will probably wrestle with until the day that I die. But over and over, I have to remind myself that God has brought me this far. He will not let me down. God is never in the business of embarrassing or belittling his people. God is never in the business of bringing us somewhere only to drop us and laugh at us. That is the enemy. That is not how God operates. God has a bigger plan than me because it was never about me or embarrassing me or emboldening me or discouraging me or encouraging me. It was about his story and what he wants to do with me in his kingdom. So when we understand that, we can wait. Take courage. God, you got big plans for me and my life, for our church, for this next phase of our marriage, for this next phase of our life. But when we understand God's timing and we understand what is the best, all that's left to do is we need to allow God to prepare us, and this is the hard part. Every one of us understand God's timing. We've been there, we've waited. Every one of us know that the best does not mean mansions and Mercedes, all right? That's not what God came. Jesus didn't die just so I could be rich, which most of us in this country have more than most who've ever lived in human civilization. 300 or 400 years ago, people would love to stay up late reading books. They couldn't because it cost so much to burn oil and lamps, and so they just had to go to bed. We have lights that stay on all night. My LED light's going to burn for 10,000 years, or 10,000 hours apparently, before I have to replace it with another $3 bulb. We live in a good time, y'all. It's good to be where we are. God has blessed us, but listen, not just understanding his timing, not just understanding what is best, we got to allow him to prepare us. And I'm going to read to you about two individuals who God was preparing in a very difficult way. Turn with me to Acts chapter 3. in this passage, the church has already grown. It's Acts chapter 2 where the church really explodes with growth, and there's this moment where people are saved, and they don't just get saved, they get baptized. They go public with their faith, and they begin growing, and the church is exploding with growth. Word is all over town. It's now spread outside of town, and when Peter walks around, he's no longer that cowardly fisherman who denied Jesus by the fire 3 times. He's Peter, and people know he preached a sermon that changed the city. And he was an uneducated fisherman, and now more people know about him than the high priest. And it's crazy. When he goes to the temple, people know. And so Peter goes around, and he's now healing people. And people are saying, man, Jesus left him with this incredible power. And on his way to the temple, he goes by the Beautiful Gate. And the Beautiful Gate was the back door to the temple. It's where the churchy people went to church. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like we got guest parking up front. We got our volunteer parking in the back. You know what I'm saying? He's like, this is where the Christians come into the back door. This is where the generous religious crowd entered the temple. There were numerous gates, but this was the highbrow gate. And there was a lame man who would sit outside that gate because if anybody should be generous, it should be Christians. Amen? Amen? Like if anybody should be giving to good causes, it's us. And they were apparently because he kept going back every day. We found out in chapter 4 he's over 40 years old and he's been coming to this gate for his adult life. Most days he's out there sitting, begging, asking. And on the way into the temple, this man asks Peter. You know what's crazy though? This man was at the gate when Jesus walked by. And Jesus didn't heal him. Isn't that wild? This dude missed the boat. For 3 years, Jesus walking around Jerusalem healing people. Jesus didn't heal him. I bet when he was born, his parents started praying over him. Lord, because the Bible tells us he was born lame. This wasn't something he did. This wasn't an accident he had. Nothing happened here. He was born with this disability. And I bet his parents started praying, if they were religious, God, heal our boy. Don't let him grow up lame. But then he does. And I bet as a young child, maybe 9 or 10, he starts praying, God, let my legs heal because I'm going to have to care for my parents. There's no Social Security here. I need to support them. I need to work. And God didn't answer that prayer. I wonder if he was outside the Beautiful Gate. Jesus went through the Beautiful Gate. Jesus was around this spot a lot, and for some reason, Jesus didn't heal him. For 40 years, he's probably begging and wondering. We know he's religious because of what happens as soon as he's healed. I wonder why Jesus didn't heal him. I wonder why God said no. We're about to find out. Acts chapter 3, verse 6, Peter's walking in. The man asks for money, and notice how Peter responds. Peter said, I don't have any silver or gold. But what I do have, I give to you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Rise up and walk. Hold up, y'all. Don't y'all do that to somebody homeless asking, all right? Because most of y'all do have silver and gold you could give them. Don't be cheap. Don't be cheap, all right? And he took him by the hand, and immediately his feet and ankle bones were made strong. Listen to this. And leaping up. He don't just I've never stood up. He jumps to his feet. Leaping up, he stood and began to walk. And notice where he goes. By the way, he's never been allowed inside this part of the temple because the Holy of the Holies was, nobody unclean was allowed in. And because of his disability, he was considered unclean. How about the fact that this man has been separated from God his whole life, and when he's healed, where does he go? He goes to the temple, and notice what he does. Leaping and praising God. Now, my question is this. Why didn't God heal him when he was 4? Why didn't God heal him when he was 14? Why didn't Jesus heal him? There's a context here that we miss often in this passage, and I want to help you understand this. The church had grown in Acts chapter 2, but it was still adding, not multiplying. It went from 120 to a few thousand, and it needed another momentum booster, something that would really help the growth go from regional to global. And when this man walked in to the back of the temple, there were thousands gathered. He walked in praising God. Notice this, verse 9. All the people, by the way, the temple wasn't a place where people jumped up and down, so everybody turned around. All the people recognized him, saw him walking and praising God, and recognized him. Why did God allow him to spend most of his adult life outside that gate? Because there was a testimony that walked into the room with him that day. They knew he wasn't a con artist. They knew he wasn't a lie. They knew this wasn't a joke. When I see things, I'm skeptical. When I see people saying things in Jesus' name, I want to dig deep. I want to find out if it's true. When that man walked in, everybody in the room recognized him as the lame man who had sat there. This was no con. This was no lie. This was no ruse. He was real. And he was really healed. and recognized him as the one who sat at the beautiful gate of the temple asking for alms. And they were filled with wonder and amazement at what had happened to him. While he clung to Peter and John, all the people, utterly astounded, ran together to them in the portico called Solomon's. This is a large porch, a large gathering area. And when Peter saw it, he addressed the people. Thousands of people are gathered. Peter takes the opportunity to preach another message. He said, "Men of Israel, why do you wonder at this? Or why do you stare at us as though by our own power or piety we made him to walk?" Now, I won't read the rest of it, but Peter preaches a short sermon and says, this is no mistake. This is a miracle, and it wasn't me. It wasn't the men with me. This is Jesus, the one that you crucified. He is alive and well, resurrected and ascended. We could not manufacture this. And people were moved. In Acts chapter 4, they were so moved, the officials arrested Peter, threw him in jail, but it was too late. Acts chapter 4 and verse 4, read with me what took place as a result of a random man on a random afternoon running into a random fisherman. But many of those who had heard the word believed. If I said many are getting baptized next week, you'd come expecting 5 or 6 to get baptized. If a church said they had a lot of growth and they had many people attending, you might say, it may be a few hundred, maybe even 1,000. I want you to notice how many people trusted on that one random afternoon. The number of the men came to about 5,000. This is the last time in the early church growth that we have a number and it's an about. From here on, it's multitudes, added, numbers, daily. The church just went from addition to multiplication. God used the story and the testimony of one man who had been born with a disability to transform a community and give the church rocket fuel as it exploded with growth. It never looked back. It changed the history of that town, changed the history of those people, and it changed human history. Our calendars reflect a difference that happened 2,000 years ago. And it's a dude that we don't know his name, who daily, I'm sure, wondered why. Mark, I thought we were talking about God's best. I know, that's the thing. Sometimes God's best only comes about when what we think is the worst is finished. And who did God use to do it? Did Jesus heal him? No. Peter. Peter, the one who cowardly denied Jesus 3 times a few weeks earlier, is now preaching boldly to a crowd that's randomly gathered. Y'all, I got no fear up in here right now talking to y'all. But when I'm in a large crowd, there ain't no way I'm grabbing a mic and saying, since we're all together, I thought we'd talk about something. That's not me. That is not me. I would die of sweat loss. You know what I'm saying? I would just, every ounce of sweat would pour out of my body and I'd shrivel up and die. I'd be so nervous. But old Peter, he's like, there's a crowd. Let me tell you about Jesus, right? Whew, that is some boldness. That is some best next level life Peter is living from where he was years ago and even weeks ago. Y'all, when God starts a process in your heart, it'll take you places and you'll do things you never thought possible. So this morning, I don't know what your best is. I don't know what you think you're capable of, but I'd multiply it times 1,000 before you start praying over it, because God can do more. He can take you farther than you ever thought he could or would. When I was 15, man, I was selfish. I wanted to do everything that everybody wanted to do, and so I got this little notebook out, and I wrote down 100 things I want to do before I die, and most of them were selfish. They were stupid. They were dumb, all right? And there's nothing wrong with some of them. They're good things, but they were all about me. And they were places I wanted to serve, places I wanted to travel, things I wanted to learn. I wanted to play guitar so the girls would like how I played guitar. You know what I'm saying? All these things were in my little silly 15-year-old notebook. You know what's funny? I found that notebook like 15 years later. We were moving and we were cleaning out my office, and I found it and I opened it up and I started laughing at those 100 things. But you know what's crazier still? A bunch of those things on my list I got to do by one reason. I would never have left Hampton Roads probably if it weren't for ministry. I love it here. I do stuff here all the time. I've gotten to travel to most of this country on missions trips, raising funds for our church, or visiting other churches. I've gotten to surf in places I'd have never been able to surf. I got a buddy on the West Coast anytime I want. I text him, we're going to meet, he's going to pick me up at the airport, and we're going to go surfing. I'm going to do it again this year. Some of the things in my book, playing guitar, man, the first church I was a part of that we were starting in Suffolk, they didn't have a worship leader, and 6 months before he left, they knew they weren't, and so they were like, Mark, we need you to learn guitar. I said, got it. It was terrible. My fingers bled. It was too awful. But then I learned guitar, and I got up in front of people, and you know what I found out? Worship leading ain't my gift, y'all. It's just not. I can play guitar. I got the thing off my list. But you know what's funny? When I began chasing God's dreams and doing what God wanted me to do with my life, all those other things, seek ye first the kingdom of God, all these things, they'll be added to you. They're not the main thing anyways. I'm still waiting for that bay and that boat and that window. You know what I mean? That's that. I'm just kidding. But God has a bigger life than you could ever dream. I looked at that little notebook and I said, what a silly, self-centered life I wanted to lead. And oh, I'm so glad God gave me a different life than that. A bigger life. God wants to take you places, use you to do things you never thought possible. And I don't know what they are, but here's how I want to close. I want you to consider what that might look like for you. See, how do we actually prepare for the best, for what's next? Well, I'll tell you how. We do wait on the Lord. We certainly understand his timing, but we begin where we are and we take our next step. The journey of 1,000 miles, starts with one step. So this morning, my encouragement to you is very simple. What is your next step, and when are you going to take it? I'm all about deadlines and goals. A goal without a deadline is just a dream. So if you have a goal of moving toward your next step, I would encourage you to put a deadline on it. For some of us, our next step is baptism. Like, we've trusted Jesus, but we've never let anybody know. You need to get baptized. And if I were you, I'd put a short time limit on it. Maybe 15 days or 30 days. Say, I'm going to contact the church, and we do not put off baptism. If you say, I want to get baptized, we're not like, well, we got to wait for the right moon cycle. And no, we'll baptize you, okay? We're going to do it when you're ready. But I'd put a deadline on it. Maybe you've been baptized, but you've never really started growing because you haven't valued your time in the Word. You don't spend time in prayer every day with God. I would put a deadline on it, and I'd put it really short. I'd be like, tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to start spending time with God. I'm going to start spending time in his Word. It's going to be really hard, but I'm going to find 10 minutes of my day where I can do that. 10 minutes of my day where I can pull my phone out of my pocket that I love looking at anyways and download the Bible app and start, right? We can do these things. The reason we're giving you these cards is not so you'll just do stuff. It's so you'll realize where you're stuck and move forward. A self-fed life is where we all start. When am I going to start reading the Word and praying? The next part is a life of prayer. And on the back, we've got apps you can download, steps you can take, classes that we offer, whatever they are. Maybe you've come to church for a while, but you've never really got involved in church. I'd encourage you to go to Life Track. It's 3 weeks long. It's 40 minutes max. You're going to meet some people and get connected. Maybe you haven't started going to group. Maybe you have. Maybe you've never served on a team. I don't know what your next step is, but if I were you, I'd just say, where am I, God? I'm going to take that step. Because here's what's crazy. That step always leads to another step. When I was 16, somebody asked me to help in second grade boys' Sunday school. And I had 22 second grade boys, and there were 2 sets of twins. Too many twos, you know what I'm saying? Whole lot of twos. And they asked crazy questions, and I grew. And I grew in my confidence. And one step led to another. And now I'm not just comfortable talking to kids. I can talk to adults. Why? Because I took a step here, a step there. And too many of us want to take all the steps this year and forget that we have a whole lifetime for God to take us step by step through this process and this journey. Too many of us underestimate what God could do in a decade, and we overestimate what he might do in a year. I'm not telling you a year from now your marriage is going to be on the cover of a magazine as the best marriage in America. But I am telling you that if you keep taking the right steps, 10 years from now, you could be the couple mentoring couples because you've walked through hell and back. You've been there. Oh, that we would value the time it takes to prepare for God to use us, to build us, to shape us, to mold us. So if you're here this morning and you've been asking God, why? Why this? Why me? Why now? Why her? Why him? Why us? I would encourage you to ask God why, but in a different way. God, why are you allowing this? What is it you're trying to teach me? Who is it you're trying to make me? And then begin declaring boldly, God, I believe you can use this to grow me into the believer, the person, the Christian, the husband, the father, the mother that you've called me to be. It all starts with a step. I hope this morning you'll take that step as we prepare. Because I have news for you. The best is yet to come. I don't know we'll ever have a year where we're like, that's the year. But I know 10 years from now, we will continue to have a history of God blessing us as a church and God blessing you as individuals. And we will look back and say, God has been faithful all along. It was slow, but it was steady. Sometimes I wondered if he was there, but he was. Jesus said, lo, I am with you always. God's with you. Where are you going? Where is he taking you? How can you prepare? Let's pray.